in fact, over the period of the last 10 minutes, 21 different aircraft, including many coming in, one departing, several other military helicopters. With that, I'm going to turn to Member Graham. Thank you for that flexibility.
You bet, Chair. And I got a couple questions on that, so hopefully we can put the visuals up to rest here for today, maybe. Maybe. The controller should have alerted the CRJ of the traffic. Yeah, we've come to that conclusion, it sounds like here. Is it uncommon for a controller to have to come back and issue an advisory? And this is for Mr. Fuller and Mr. Allen. Is it uncommon for them to have to come back a second time to give a visual separation that's already been given to a pilot, have to alert for or give an advisory for traffic, like this case?
In my experience, it's uncommon, but I was an en route controller. En route, typically, it's a radar environment. When the aircraft report themselves in sight and they're maintaining visual, it's typically in a climb descent profile, and normally you don't have to go back through. There are rare occasions where a pilot may say, I lost the aircraft, can you give me traffic again? And you would repoint out the traffic to them. It's not that common, but it does happen.
Does that? Mr. Allen?
As far as a DCA, with the times of high volume, high complexity in a dense area, it is common that a local controller would follow up to ensure that the aircraft still sees the other one, is going to maintain visual separation.
Sure, totally understand. Been there as a pilot myself. Sometimes I lose somebody. It happens. And a matter of fact, looking at some of the studies and some of the docket we have, it's not uncommon for a controller to come back not just twice, but sometimes 3 or 4 times in this case. So let me ask my 2 pilots in the back row, Mr. Dressler and the Chief Warrant Officer, if you're given visual separation from another aircraft, what is it that you can do at that point when given visual separation, you have the traffic in sight? How can you maneuver your helicopter? Mr. Dressler?
You can slow, you can stop, you can turn, you can climb. Helicopters, especially in general, descend far faster than they can climb. So you have all sorts of maneuvering that you can provide. In the case of, I think most helicopters operate at close to max gross weight, at least in our environment, and certainly in the medevac environment with a patient on board. So I may not necessarily be able to come to a complete stop midair, but I could certainly travel at, say, 20 miles an hour, what's called above effective translational lift. I can do that all day at 20 miles an hour. I can make very tiny circles. There's all kinds of maneuvering we can perform. Anything different, Warrant Officer?
No, sir. Based on my experience, though, in that area, I cannot recall a time where I had to maneuver my aircraft to maintain visual separation. When I requested visual separation, it was from an aircraft that was no factor, and I could continue on my course. I didn't have to maneuver.
Okay. Mr. Fuller, as a pilot myself, fixed-wing pilot, when I'm given visual separation, what is the minimum separation distance I must maintain from the aircraft that I'm visual on? And have told them that I will maintain visual separation from that aircraft. What is the minimum, statutory minimum?
Ultimately, the pilot is the authority for the safe operation of their aircraft. I don't believe there's a statutory minimum required distance other than the pilot.
Correct. There is no stated minimum distance horizontally or vertically, but I must maintain separation on that aircraft safely. Okay.
Yes, sir.
I'm finished with this line. I'll come back.
Member Inman.
Thank you. So, Mr. Lehman, I'm just going to go back again for a moment. You wrote that memo in 2022 stating that the arrival rate should go to what number?
It was 2023, and At the time, we said 32 north because it's different because of airspace constraints especially, and there's many other constraints, but 32 north and 28 south. In other words, north being runway 1, south being runway 19.
Okay. And after the FAA reauthorization, as I understand it, 5 additional slots were created. Whenever you hear 5 slots, does that mean operations?
No. I mean, in reality, the slots didn't matter to air traffic. You can have the slots. I'm just going to tell you, you can have what I wanted, 32 when you're landing runway 1 and 28 when you're landing. So you can have as many slots as you want as far as I'm concerned, as long as we regulate the number of airplanes that go in there.
So how many airplanes are currently operating in and out of DCA?
Currently, after we have adjusted the rate, and when I say we, I wasn't involved in it, but it is right now the rate is at 30 north and 30 south.
So I'll go to Mr. Fuller. With that reduction, would that tend to lead to where there would not be as much pressure for controllers to need to offload traffic to 3-3 to get them off of 1?
Again, I couldn't say it. I haven't worked there. Obviously, yes, it reduces the rate there. The real challenge, and is what they've all spoken about, is we have to balance the flow so that even if it's 30, they're even throughout the hour and not in the last half hour. And we've worked with the airlines, and we've been monitoring it consistently to make sure that that 30, whether it's 30 or 32, it's even and it's nice and smooth.
Mr. Allen, your thought on that?
With the lower rate that we're currently operating, or potentially the rates that were discussed in the memo of 2023, obviously if you reduce the volume, you reduce risk, and you reduce the need to utilize additional runways.
Okay, and I'll go back to, would that mean that you would need a less reliance on trying to offload traffic to 3-3 while helicopters may be in the area, or you're trying to get traffic off of 1?
Yes, sir.
It should, right?
Correct.
So I'm going to read you a commentary, and I apologize, it may not be in the docket, so it may be your first time, but I just want to get your impression on this. Controller asked us to maintain 170 knots, leading us 3 miles out of traffic in front. We heard the tower ask an aircraft in front of us on the approach if they could circle to 3-3, and warning multiple aircraft of helicopter traffic at 7 to 800 AGL. At 1642 Zulu, as we were on approach at 5 nautical mile Fowler, controller in a rushed manner told an aircraft holding short of runway 1 they may be able to depart before inbound. Controller then asked if we were able to circle runway 33, told my first officer we were unable to circle due to weight and reduced performance and higher outside temperature. And he said as much in clear terminology in the responding radio call. Despite this, the tower controller hurriedly responded back that our landing clearance for runway 1 was canceled and we were cleared to circle runway 33 and cleared to land. I immediately made a radio call firmly reiterating we were unable to runway 33, and the tower recleared us to land on 1. The aircraft behind us was then cleared for the circle to land runway 33. Approach was normal. However, on the landing rollout, as we'd slowed to exit on taxiway in, and having cleared an aircraft to land on it, the tower controller then said to contact ground and they would tell us where to exit. They were actually, I'm sorry, they told us instead to exit on runway 33 earlier. Does that make sense to you?
It does.
Does that sound like a normal day for you?
Yeah, utilizing runway 33 as a taxiway does occur.
But them trying to push in multiple times to get them to take 3-3 while they're trying to get out on 1, and then changing the clearance?
Usually if a controller hears that they're unable runway 33, they understand that and clear them to land runway 1. This may have been a scenario where the controller potentially may have not have heard it or misunderstood. But they wouldn't pressure a pilot like that. They wouldn't pressure a pilot like that if they said they were unable to runway.
Okay. As a captain, I view this event as unacceptable. Complacency, expectation bias, and task saturation at DCA led to a drastic increase in threats to my passenger and crew. Only reason I bring this up is we now have pilots that are on the planes that we're flying are saying, can we talk to you afterwards? This was my and my wife's flight last month, 30 days ago. Said, I'd like to tell you what happened because I don't feel like anyone's listening. Does that concern you?
It's concerning if no one's listening.
It is me too. See, I'm over time, Chair.
Thank you. Actually, picking up on that, Mr. Fuller, earlier you said, my question is actually for Mr. Allen, but earlier you had said that the pilots of commercial aircraft can choose whether to take 3-3 or not. That's true. And I believe, well, what I'll say is, I'll point to our interview. We asked, how often does ATC ask you if you're willing to take 3-3? This was a PSA pilot that we interviewed. We interviewed several. And this individual said, I will say out of, I don't know, let's say out of 10 times, well, like I will say 6 times out of 10 or 5 out of 10, it all depends on the day, how busy they are. If you have a lot of departures and a lot of arrivals, if the time of the day, it's, you know, it's in good weather conditions and it's visual. Usually if they have a lot of departures, they will ask, mostly regionals these days, the regionals before the Embraer 175s and us, they go like, if you're able to do 3-3. I've been doing this approach for more than 3 years. I know that the aircraft is capable of doing it. Either the 700 and the 900, both of them are capable of landing 3-3. Obviously, we send for the data, and we make sure that we have the data to land 3-3, and most of the time, we know it helps ATC. So earlier, there was a conversation of, well, they can choose to take it or not, but there is some pressure. At least the pilots that we interviewed did indicate that they want to be helpful to ATC by trying to take it if they can. The flight before 5342 did not, and in interviews said that their colleague was not comfortable with landing on 3-3 and didn't question it at all. So they went ahead and landed on runway 1. I just want to go back, and I'll come back to that later. I want to go back to the minute 27 seconds and the controller and the circling at runway 33. The local controller said, and others said in their interviews, that they are taught to work their way in and out. I'm not a controller. Mr. Allen, what does that mean? You're taught to work your way in and out.
I don't know that.
It was a common phrase. Mr. Fuller, do you know?
Again, that's not a phrase that I'm familiar with. I see Mr. Soper with his hand up. Perhaps he can provide
I'm
some
going to
clarity.
guess it means you're working your way on the ground, then back out. Is that true?
Yeah.
On the ground and back out. But several controllers said this. We were taught to work in and then out. So this controller said, well, gave them visual separation. They said they'd maintain visual separation. Whose responsibility is it to maintain visual separation when you say you're going to maintain visual separation?
When you're utilizing pilot applied, it would be the pilot.
The pilot?
Yes.
The aircraft, in this case,
Yeah.
Pat 25. So there's a lot going on. At this point, there's an American Airlines taking off from one of the runways, and I can't remember. Was it runway 1? Yep, okay. How often do you all have to use how often do you say takeoff, no delay on takeoff, or cleared for immediate takeoff without delay?
Frequently.
Why?
Because the airport frequently has compacted demand, whether it's arrivals or just departures or a combination of both.
Yeah, in fact, at that night, the helicopter crew had said, boy, they got them really stacked up tonight, coming in on runway 1. So I'll come back to that in a second. What assistance is available to the local controller in times where the local controller believes there's heavy traffic in the tower?
if they're concerned, when you say traffic, do you mean the fixed wing traffic or the helicopter
Everything going
traffic?
on at that point.
If they felt that if the local and helicopters were combined and they felt that maybe they're having too much fixed wing traffic, that they can't manage a helicopter or something, they can turn to the supervisor and ask for the position to be split off if needed.
Can I ask you one question on that? Assistant local controller, the responsibilities according to the standard operating procedures by FAA is to alert and assist the local controller, surveillance of local traffic pattern. When the local control and helicopter positions are combined, help monitor the helicopter frequencies. In the operating procedures dated June 1st, 2024, it says for the assistant local controller, this position is considered essential to the operational integrity and safety levels required to minimize the potential for surface errors, and land over incidents. What was the assistant local controller doing that evening, and were they present? Mr. Fuller.
To my knowledge, the assistant local controller was present and working their position. Now, as far as the specific activities, I don't know.
Does anyone know? Does anyone that we've called know? Nope. Okay. Thank you. I'll come back to that. Member Graham.
Dr. Allendorfer, I think this one's for you. You seem to understand the conflict alerting system. Can you tell me a little bit about what it is, as far as, is it a program within a system in the tower?
Conflict Alert is part of the STARS system, Standard Terminal Automation Replacement System. There is a display, a STARS display in the tower cab. The alerts, when they occur, they appear on that display. It's part of the software of all STARS systems. And it was in the ARTS, which was the system before the STARS.
Okay. So what sensors feed that system, or what sensors do the algorithms look at?
It uses what's called a fuse track position. Fuse track position brings in whatever sensors are feeding the STARS system. So if you have some short-range radars, a long-range radar, ADSB, whatever sources are available, the fuse track position, for lack of a better word, is a weighted average of those positions. So in the case of DCA, where there's very good radar coverage, the fuse track position is predominantly the radar, the short-range radar target, but it actually is a combination of all the sources that it receives, weighted by the quality of those sources.
Okay, so it's looking at radar data, and it's picking up what transponders out there of aircraft?
Correct.
Correct. Okay. So it's going to give a conflict alert when it determines that two aircraft are converging at some point from what it's tracking.
Correct. The algorithm that's known as a linear conflict, which is the name for it is the LinCon. It's one of the sub-algorithms of conflict alert. What it does is it projects into the future, and based on the current speed and heading, projects both aircraft where they'll be in that period of time. If they are below certain thresholds, it will activate. One of the other sub-algorithms of conflict alert, which is called a proximity conflict, known as PROCON. PROCON is about, it doesn't project into the future, it is what's happening right at the moment. So if two aircraft are currently too close, PROCON will activate and conflict alert will activate.
Okay. So the night of the accident, the system was tracking both aircraft, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Is there, since the military helicopter didn't have ADSB out, did that inhibit this system from working any quicker?
The fuse track position would have been using, in the track for the helicopter, it would have been just based on radar. Close to the airport, the radar coverage is very good, so the alert would activate at the same time it would have if the coverage were not as good, then that would be a different story, but in this case, the radar coverage is very good.
So in this case, the ADSB out, not working on the Black Hawk, didn't matter in this situation. Is that correct?
If it did, very, very little, sir.
Very, very little. Okay, thank you for that. Okay. For Mr. Allen, in the case of this accident, the local controller called the traffic to Pat 25 basically after they turned over the tidal basin, it looked like, and the CRJ was just south of the Wilson Bridge, and I think we determined about 7.5 miles between the two aircraft. Is that correct?
Yeah, approximately that's correct.
What would the controller been using to want to make that call for the traffic at that far out?
I mean, with calling traffic, you want to call it early and often. You know, if you see the potential for a conflict or a situation to develop, you want to issue traffic as soon as possible and get the pilots looking in that direction to see each other.
So he would have probably been looking at the radar and maybe his own situational awareness, knowing where both aircraft are. Is that would have?
Yeah, similarly to like I described, I think it was earlier today, controllers develop a scan where they're scanning out the window, they're scanning the radar, they're grabbing bits and pieces of information, processing what is happening, and then working from there in the priorities that are occurring at that moment.
Okay, great. Let me ask you, I still have a couple minutes here. The chair here was talking about how many aircraft the local controller was handling at that time. And the way I added it up, it looked like about 10 aircraft. I believe there were 4 helicopters. There were 4 on frequency, I think, somewhere during the approach. And then there were, I believe, 2 planes on the ground on frequency ready for takeoff. Is that a normal load for a local controller at DCA?
Yes.
Yes. Is there any concern of that number, or is that just standard?
I would say that's standard.
Standard. Okay. Thank you.
Member Inman.
So I want to go back to earlier, and I apologize because we've had a lot of different topics. So I'm going to pose this to just the FAA to start with. TVFM, right? Is that the correct acronym? Somebody?
Yes, that's a correct acronym.
Okay. In this situation, we're talking about this capacity issue and what was needed to do to try to help regulate better planes coming into DCA. This would make that DCA much safer if this system was implemented. Is that correct?
Correct.
Who is that?
That's myself.
Mr. Fuller?
Yes.
I would say if it works as designed, yes.
Okay. Mr. Allen, would you like to have this?
100%.
What's stopping it?
It's currently being implemented.
How long is it going to take?
I believe I'll defer to Mr. Fuller.
It's expected to be in by late February, early March for it to be activated.
Of 2026?
2026.
So a year after this accident?
Correct. To install a system like that is not just as simple as putting the equipment at DCA. It only functions if the adjacent facilities feeding DCA also know how to apply the software. And so in this particular case, we have to deploy the software and train the employees of 8 different, maybe even 9, en route control centers, along with the employees at Potomac TRACON and DCA Center. And so there's a waterfall schedule to make this all happen.
Okay. I don't know if you were here for the testimony yesterday, but I mentioned something to the Army. Could you hurry it up?
I understand, and we are doing it as fast as we possibly can.
Is it, Mr. Lehman, have you done this implementation before, Mr. Lehman?
No, the equipment has been at Potomac for approximately 7 years.
Whoa, stop. Go back. I'm sorry. Can you repeat that one more time?
The equipment has been at Potomac for approximately 7 years. But I need New York Center and Washington Center to be able to, for the most part, the TRACON doesn't do anything. We just accept what the centers do.
Mm-hmm.
So, and what I said earlier was, for whatever reason, and I don't have all the details, but New York Center and Washington Center, and I believe it was because of the size of their sectors, which is a real issue, have said that they can't do it international. I don't know why they can now.
Are you optimistic with the most recent funding that was advocated by the Secretary into the latest bill that it would help accelerate this project? And I'll just pose it to anyone.
Yes.
Okay. I'll go on to just a few other things, and I apologize. I'm going through my notes from earlier, so I may jump in and out of some questions. Mr. Fuller, earlier you mentioned that your air traffic controllers are doing everything they can to move everyone as safely as possible. Does that sound correct? Because I wrote it down in
Yes,
quotes.
that is correct.
Okay. Do you feel that you're needing to compromise on safety because operators are pressuring you to move more aircraft through the system than what it can currently hold?
In full transparency, again, I've only been in this position for about a month. I will tell you the conversations I've had with our administrator and the Secretary of Transportation, we don't feel that pressure. Our whole mission and everything we base it around is safety first. And all I get is let us know who we have to have the conversation with if you're not getting what you need. So I don't know what happened beforehand, but I can tell you right now I don't feel that pressure at all.
Mr. Allen? Same question.
There's no pressure from the operators to continue to move traffic. I would say any pressures that are applied to the traffic volume at DCA are applied because no one's listening, such as the memo discussing the arrival rate, things of that nature. And I lost the other part I was going to say.
It's okay. I can move down to Mr. It's okay. We can always come back. Mr. Lehman?
Direct pressure? No.
Indirect pressure, any type of pressure.
I don't get a chance to talk to the airlines directly. I've never met Mr. Silverman till today. Do I feel the pressure from the command center? Yes, I do feel the pressure from the command center. And I want to add to that. I feel like our ratio of safety to efficiency has gone slightly too far towards efficiency.
Mr. Allen, you had your finger kind of raised for a moment.
I had a moment, I remembered. I was going to say the pressure would be internal to the agency to maintain the status quo and move the traffic, and unless you have a good reason why not to.
So I guess the question would be, we talked about COVID or not, maybe a few seconds over. I mean, at this point, we were kind of at this size before COVID, and now we seem to be going this way. I see a few head nods. Have we pulled the rubber band too tight to what we can currently accept? Ms. Chindy, feel free.
Thank you. So, DCA has a problem with scheduling. DCA is still handling the number of operations that it had before COVID. Whenever we get the chance to apply a ground delay program for DCA, the operation goes well, no issues. The issues that my colleagues bring up are those time frames when you have a large mix of arrivals and departures. You know, taking the operations are times to like 76, 78. I mean, we've even seen, I've seen it where the total operations, and I'm talking arrivals and departures, where it gets up to like 80, right? And that certainly is more than the airport can handle. And of course, in a time frame like that, a traffic management initiative needs to be put in place. We certainly need more than mile and trill at that point. We more than likely will be going into a ground stop and then coming out of a ground stop into a ground delay program. When we have those implemented, it goes well. TBFM, or time-based metering. That would actually work like us having a ground delay program all the time for DCA. There were a few things that we were touching, and if I could just get the chance to talk about.
Please, we want to hear.
Okay, thank you. The arrival rate at a 32, the way Mr. Lehman has mentioned, we are talking about using the main runway, the single runway, runway 1. Now, that works if we're ignoring the fact that there are alternate runways. Since this incident has taken place, we've actually had periods where we've simply utilized runway 1 and landed 32, and actually had periods where we've departed 34, 35. We've only done that because we've utilized the secondary runways. What I'm saying here is there is capacity with the other runways. That's why when they brought up the document, we looked at it and then worked on what is it that is not happening that should. And it was the fact that runway 33 was not being utilized. Of course, if we're talking about not utilizing runway 33, totally makes sense for us to drop the rate. And if that's the posture that we're getting into, then it totally makes sense. I just wanted to clear that up so it doesn't look like we're not listening to the arrival rate discussion.
Thank you. And I'm going to go back to I have a lot of questions, so I'm going to go back to my previous question. Was an assistant local controller there, Mr. Fuller?
To my knowledge, yes, an assistant local
Yes.
controller with staff, yes.
Okay, thank you. Where were they in the tower?
I don't specifically know that. I would assume at the assistant local control position, which is right adjacent to the local control position.
Yes, okay. So, and then all communications at this point, so the helicopter position and local control position were combined, and all communications at that time were on speaker, correct?
I believe that's correct.
Is that standard? Do you do that when they're combined, or you do that just generally? So you could,
The local control position, according to the DCA SOP, is required to be in speaker.
can you speak up a little?
Yeah, the DCA standard operating procedure requires that local control be in speaker for
Okay.
the general tower awareness.
So they're combined, so everyone in the tower can hear communications with helicopter and local control and the civilian aircraft and local control, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'm again wondering what assistance is then provided for a local controller that says for them, and back to Mike's point, you mentioned that it's pretty standard to have that amount of traffic, and we just use different time frames for how many aircraft they were handling at that time, that it's pretty standard to handle that level of traffic. But in this case, that controller said that they felt it was a heavy workload, a 4 out of 5. Others felt it was a 2. So is anyone providing assistance at that time? You're all listening for the local controller to point out there's converging traffic.
So the local controller, each controller has their own set of skills and abilities and what those limits may be. If a controller feels that they are overwhelmed or it is too complex or there's too much volume, they can speak with the supervisor who's directly behind them and ask for additional assistance, whether that's to open another position or you could call out to Potomac and say, we need to stop arrivals, or whatever remedies you deem necessary in that specific situation.
Yes, and thank you for that. And again, I'm not blaming anyone at all. We're just trying to figure out what was happening. And no one has been able to answer what the assistant local controller who is there to help with surveillance, what was happening. How does nobody do you know, Mr. Fuller, what that individual was doing at that time?
So I've not had the opportunity to interview that employee. I've only read the statements from the NTSB interview, where I don't believe the employee in that interview specifically stated what they were doing.
Yeah.
And so therefore, I haven't had the opportunity to definitively say myself. What I will tell you is, from a leadership perspective, regardless of whether there was one aircraft that could have been split off from the helicopter position, my expectation is that one helicopter should have been getting the best service possible from the helicopter controller if we have available resources. If we don't, that's a different conversation. So we've had that conversation with our managers, and we expect them to push that down. Utilize the resources you have available to take off that workload. So if that controller felt that they were at a 4 or 5, even if it was only pulling off one aircraft, we should have pulled off that one aircraft.
Okay, and well, that leads to another question then on the helicopter position and the combining and decombining. We had a very different response than we anticipated by air traffic controllers about whether there were disadvantages of keeping them decombined. Are there advantages to combining them?
Yeah, the advantages to combining them, if you're the local controller with helicopters combined, you can develop the overall picture and the plan and how things are going to go. You can develop it your way. You don't have to rely on another controller that is operating in your airspace, executing their plan. So you can have a holistic view, you can execute a plan that you've drawn up, and it also cuts down on coordination back and forth.
And along those lines, just two questions. What would have to happen if they're decombined? How does one communicate? How does the helicopter control position communicate with the local control position? Does that take time? How do they coordinate those two? And then what happens with radio communications if they're separate?
Yeah, so as far as the internal communication, the helicopter controller would input scratch pad entries that are listed in our SOP for the facility and use the STARS automated function to do a point out, or they could communicate verbally with the local control the intentions of what the helicopter is doing and get approval. As far as the frequency portion, if they are decombined, local control would just be listening to 19.1 and 257.6, and helicopters would have UHF and VHF 134.35.
So the helicopter control position would be communicating with the helicopters, and local control would be communicating with civilian aircraft.
Correct, with the fixed wing.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you. Member Graham.
I'm going to stay with that. When did DCA split frequencies for helicopter and fixed-wing aircraft? Does anybody know on the panel?
Can you repeat it? I'm sorry.
Yeah, when did DCA split the frequencies for helicopter and fixed-wing aircraft? Do we know what year?
I don't know. As far as I went back to 2013, they had a helicopter position, so I don't know when it was prior to that.
Do we know why this was done initially by any? Do we know anybody know that on the panel?
There was some direct direction by the director, approximately 2015, 2016, the director of air traffic operations, that required the position to be open from 8 to 8 at the time. That was the direction, and
that came out then?
that's correct.
Okay, that's where I wanted to go here. So DCA's air traffic control tower helicopter control position staffing standard operating procedures underwent several major changes in the 10 years leading up to this accident. In 2016, the change required staffing the helicopter control position separately during specific hours on each day of the week, including from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., Monday through Friday. This procedure was reiterated in 2020. So do we know why this change was made, and why were those specific hours chosen? Does this panel know that?
I don't have direct knowledge of why those hours were chosen.
Okay, I was wondering if it might have been because maybe there was an increase in night helicopter traffic, possibly, but it doesn't sound like anybody in this panel knows.
I can speak to one of them.
Okay.
The most recent one, can you give me the year again?
I'm sorry, say again?
What was the year for the most recent change you were referring to?
2020. It was reiterated in 2020.
2020, whenever we looked at that, we looked at our staffing numbers. We looked at the historical data of when helicopters typically depart, and when we had increased volumes, and adjusted those hours accordingly.
Okay, thank you. That helps. In 2023, the standard operating procedures changes, they changed to remove the requirement for the helicopter control position to be staffed, and instead said it must normally be decombined during a different set of hours each day, including this time from 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. Monday through Friday. Why was this change made?
I'm sorry, when I spoke just a minute ago, that's the change I was referring to, where we evaluated the hours, the historical data of when helicopters, we looked at the traffic count for a period of time and determined it. It was on that last one you just spoke
so there was probably more helicopter traffic at that time of night through that time?
Yeah, we had recognized that the helicopters, for their morning training missions and flights that they do, did not incur until later in the morning. So there was no need earlier in the morning. And then we had discussions about how helicopters potentially, at times later in the evening, would conduct their night flying.
Okay, that makes sense. But I'm wondering, why was the requirement removed, and why were the hours, well, I know why they were shifted to later, but why was the requirement to must normally be decombined, where before it was required to be separate?
My recollections from the discussions we had at that time was to allow the person, either the operations supervisor or the controller in charge, allow them to effectively manage their shift and be dynamic with resources. For example, right now we're in swap season, severe weather avoidance program with bad lines of thunderstorms. It's been a bad summer so far. Having helicopters open during severe weather when there are no helicopters does not make sense when you can take that resource and reallocate it to ground control, where flights are getting backed up, there's heavy amounts of delays, so on and so forth. You can reallocate that resource to provide more breaks because there's going to be a whole evening of heavy volume and heavy complexity due to weather. Or if we're in a de-icing operation, to be able to assist with that. So it just allowed the controller or the controller in charge or the operations supervisor to effectively manage their shift based on the constraints that appeared at that given time.
Okay. So the question is, on the night of the accident, do we know why it was combined? Those that you just talked about weren't an issue, but there was considerable helicopter traffic, and there was much more considerable fixed-wing traffic.
So prior to the accident, we had conducted training, and they were debriefing. So the resource was allocated to training.
And I know earlier you said they could have been called up there if they saw fit.
If deemed necessary. I believe at the time there were approximately 3 helicopters. One was landing a hospital out to the west. There was no impact to the operation. Another one was not in the immediate vicinity, and the third helicopter, Pat, was the only one approaching the immediate vicinity.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Allen.
Yep.
The technical or the hearing officer has texted me saying lots of people are asking for a break, so we're going to take a 15-minute break, come back at 5, and start with Member Inman.